All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Emil Kressel, and I'm just going to introduce Larrimie Gordon here and then let him have control over everything. This is the first session of University of Texas Career Development Lunch and Learn. We have 7 different sessions, and the first one is Larrimie Gordon's, which he's going to cover the nuts and bolts of career development, things like your resume and interviewing and your letter of interest, very important components of landing you the job that you want and need. The way that the format works is this is a webinar, so it's not a meeting, meaning that we're going to be promoting information to you, but our chat is open and you are welcome and encouraged to use that chat feature if you just want to sort of network and chat amongst yourselves. The Q&A is good if you have a specific question for Larrimie. I'm going to have to get used to calling you Larrimie, but usually I call him Gordon by his last name. But if you have questions for Larrimie, use the Q&A and he'll do his best to answer those questions. I will also try and keep an eye on it. But again, if you have a question, use the Q&A, not the chat. The chat is used for just sort of talking amongst yourselves. Larrimie does have handouts, and so we are going to use our attendance list after this career development lunch and learn, and then we'll send you the materials afterwards so that you'll have something to take away, some of the more granular material, and as a points of reference, you'll be able to use those handouts moving forward. The other sessions are the same time every week for the next 7 weeks, next 6 weeks, and I encourage you to register for all of those if you're interested, and really encourage other colleagues, friends to join. We in particular really want to get information to students, whether they're student employees or just regular students. There's a lot of great information here for people who are either just thinking about starting their career or thinking about switching careers or growing in their career. So please share this information as much as possible. What else? What am I missing, Gordon?
I think that's about it.
Okay, well, I'll be here in the background. If you need anything, please, questions are welcome, chatting is welcome. And thank you everyone so much for joining us. We have 71 people attending so far.
I'm the Employee Engagement Coordinator for the Facility Services Department here on campus. We have close to 800 staff. That's landscape, maintenance folks, custodial. So wide range, very diverse group and skill set and background and level of education. So they definitely keep me on my toes. So this is kind of, Gordon is my last name. Yes, Jessica. My first name's Larrimie. Hardly anybody calls me that. My mom does, but other handful of people. So today we're going to talk about the nuts and bolts of career development. So it's something that, in the past has been seen more of, objective. Like there's these specific things like you're only supposed to have 1 page in your resume. You're supposed to do formatting this way. And I'm sure all of us at some point have heard someone talk to us about that. But as we go through today, I'm not going to be giving you all of those like templates and all of that stuff. So sorry. There'll be an example in the handout, but it's really more to think about your development strategically and kind of what you're trying to get at, right? The vibe that you're trying to create, the expertise that you're trying to convey to, either internal promotions or reclassifications, new jobs, really anything. Concepts can be applied across the board at some of those areas. So I myself am a teacher by trade. That's what I went to school for, even though I have taught 2 days of substitute teaching, but that's about it. So it's really, no one's ever taught us how to manage our career, right? If you have, you've been very lucky. I've been very lucky to have mentors such as Emil and some other folks on campus that have kind of helped me understand these things. And now it's something that I do help our employees with as much as I can. So you're never taught how to do it, and it's hard. It's kind of like learning styles. People talk about that and how you never really know how you learn until you learn how you learn. And so we're going to talk about it kind of in that context of doing a little bit more evaluation of what it really is that you want, whether that's a new job or changing how your role suits your day-to-day processes and all of those things. But the industry as a whole, I believe, has become a lot more subjective, especially when you're talking about resumes and cover letters. So that's going to be one of the things that we talk about here in a little bit. So just kind of quick overview. We're going to talk a little bit about that pre-work that I mentioned, the things you do before you get ready to apply for a job, and obviously resume and cover letter, and then a whole separate section about the interview process before, during, and after, some kind of tips and tricks. Don't feel like you need to take copious notes because I'm going to hit all of the bullet points plus even a little bit more in the handout that's provided to you afterward. There'll also be some links in that document for some additional resources that I found over the years. So what I want to do is start off with this, and I don't know that we actually had the poll ready, Emil, but we can just kind of talk about it this way. If you want to raise your hand, if you think
I can go ahead and I'll put it together really quickly if you want me to do that.
Okay. Well, I'll just wait for him to do that real quick. But so be thinking for when the poll goes up. There's going to be a few different options. But what do you think is the most influential factor in being selected for a new position? Is it things like how is it you're formatting your documents? Is it you using fancy big words in your cover letter? Is it more the personal approach, right? And again, very, very subjective. Hiring managers are just like us. Carta said who you know. Sometimes, especially in higher education, that may be who it is. And I would say even more so, not who you know, but who knows you. So when you're thinking about answering this question, some multiple of these things might be important. What I want you to think about when you answer this poll is which of these things could be so great that they would overshadow the other thing, right? Like what's really the thing that you think has the most impact, regardless of what the levels are of the other ones, what that looks like. Does anyone want to raise their hand and, just explain what that means to them as far as who you know? Not everybody at once. Jessica.
I'll put it in. Let's see if I can.
So, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I actually have recently applied for a ton of jobs just for career advancement. And the only ones that I have gotten, not even an interview for, but hey, I'll push your resume along so people can look at it, are the ones where people know who I am or where I know somebody, whether it be from the networking or from personal relationships that I have. And yeah, for other jobs that I've applied for, I had not even gotten a single look on my resume or my application if I didn't know somebody. And that's really like how the game is played these days.
Thanks, Jessica. I appreciate that. And we'll do, and just one more. So Jessica brings up a really great point, right? And so what we're going to talk about today.
Say,
And
Gordon, there's a few more hands up if you want to get to them.
yes, I'm going to say something real quick, and then I'll call.
Okay, gotcha.
Trevicia, I believe that's how you say your name. I'll call on you next in just a second. But what I wanted to say is that, through this series, this session, but also a couple of the other sessions, we're going to talk about how you can overcome kind of that hurdle, right? Job market's really competitive right now. How can you make yourself stand out? And that's a big part of it. And not just like the ooh in your face kind of stand out, but some of the later sessions will go more into, some of the networking pieces of it. But I think that a really great cover letter, in my opinion, can kind of overcome a lot of that. Who you know personally, like I said, it's very subjective. That's the first thing I ever look at, is the cover letter, because that's where the personality is. And more hiring committees are supposed to be moving more towards those behavioral interview questions. And that's really how you know you have a good fit for your position. So Trevicia, if you just want to unmute yourself now.
Hi. I actually didn't pick that option, but I can see why people picked it, because there can be jobs where like they don't post the position on a job board. And so if you know somebody that works there, if you know somebody that knows somebody, then they'll let you know, hey, there's this job that might be opening soon. If you're interested, let me know. And then sort of a thing. So that's why I picked it.
Yeah, it's definitely helpful to get a jump on that opportunity when you can, because that's when a lot of that stuff happens.
So can I just ask, what option did you pick?
I actually picked resume.
Okay.
And I picked that because where I'm working right now, they actually like are hiring and they're looking at it a lot. They're not really paying all that much attention to like other things. So I figured the resume was probably the best option.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. And then we'll do just one more, Stacy.
So I'm actually, Stacy sent me the invite. I'm actually Casey, but you can call me. I didn't select that one either. And so I just wanted to share as well. I actually picked interview, and what I can speak to the reason why I think other people did as well. Every single job that I've ever gotten is because someone either pointed me to the job or they recommended me for the job. And so I can say that is definitely an influencer. But I can also say that it was a little disheartening because it's like, so I didn't even need to show up for the interview, So when you think about the question being selected, like that's pretty powerful. That it just takes somebody, but that also makes sense because I've worked with some people who, not where I'm currently working, but I've worked with some people where it's just like, how did you even get this job? You're not really qualified for it. And so it just kind of makes me sad that it's just really often who you know.
Yeah. Appreciate that, Casey. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, and that's something that we all kind of deal with. The thing that to think about in managing your career in that sense is not just having to focus so much on the networking piece, but you network to get your resume seen, right? Your resume gets your cover letter seen. Your cover letter is what gets you the interview. And when it all comes down to it, most of the time, I think the interview is what is going to determine who gets that position and who doesn't. Because I've been up for some of those jobs as well, where somebody pointed me to it, and then I didn't end up getting it. So like they read my resume, whatever, wasn't good fit or whatever the reasoning was, experience, things like that. So I say all this to say, don't always focus on one thing, right? You want to look at it holistically. So then we're going to jump into our next section. So pre-work. So I'm going to just cover this pretty briefly because the next session, I believe they're going to talk about strengths, self-assessments, but really when you are thinking about a change, you need to think about not just, a lot of people say the main reason they want a job is more money, right? Sometimes it's important. I'm not going to say it's not important, but is it going to be really the thing that's going to make you stay? Are you going to feel like you're doing what you want to be doing, that your work is being beneficial, the team that you work around, things like that. And so once you kind of get your head wrapped around that part, you look at the job, right? How can you be the best candidate for that? How can you take some extra steps to use resources that you have access to, use people you have access to that can give you guidance, help you learn new skills, to be able to make yourself more presentable and more applicable to that job position. Then obviously, talk about it. There's this stigma, I guess, that's out there that, it's kind of the thing that you don't really talk about because people might think that you're not loyal to your company or whatever the case may be, whatever people's feelings are. And so I think you need to surround yourself, with folks that you feel comfortable with. You don't have to talk to each of these groups of people, but at least, one or two who's a great mentor. A quick backstory, right? So I went to school to be a PE teacher, right? I started working for the athletics department as a facilities part-time employee my junior year of college. One of those things where, it was kind of a who you know thing. A job came up 3 days after I graduated, right place, right time, just kind of fell into it. But really, my passion's always been about, helping develop others and teaching. And so I started trying to work my way into extracurricular activities, different groups that I can be involved in, building my network on campus of people who cared about the same things that I did. So when my position that I have now came up almost 3 years ago now, I talked to people like Emil, right, who I had gotten to know through that process because it wasn't a industry that I had been working in explicitly. Like, as far as experience goes on a resume, wasn't really much there, right? So you can talk through, and sometimes it takes that second set of eyes to really say, like, this really translates, right? I was a facility manager for 6 years in the athletics department. Very different from the HR type role that I have now, but there was a lot of relationship building that was really important for both jobs, that was a transferable thing, right? And so trying to not look at just do I have this qualification? Do I have this qualification? Do I have this experience? Really kind of thinking about what it is that they're asking, right? Some job descriptions might say, we want this, this, and this. Well, the reason they might want this and this is because they know that if you've done this, it means you have this set of skills. But if you can show that you have this set of skills and not this experience, does it matter? Maybe. So some people it does. But that's another way where you can kind of make yourself a little bit more sought after for those type of rules, those type of roles. Next, you got to do something, right? It's not going to just always fall in your lap, although sometimes it may be right place, right time, but that doesn't always mean that it's a great fit for you, right? So we talked about, think about it, what it is that you want. You gotta make some moves, right? Do some research on the industry, about the positions that you're looking for. What are the kind of things? What do you need to be more, to get that job, right? Make yourself a plan. We have, the majority of us on this call are university employees. There's groups like Emil's group that this is what they do. They can help you figure out, ways to utilize the resources on campus to gain the experience, to gain the training, any sort of like certifications, things like that. How you can utilize those resources that you have while you're waiting for that perfect job to come up. All right, now to the nuts and bolts. I've kept this pretty limited because, like I said, it's very subjective. But in all the objective people that I've talked to, a couple of key things kind of ring through as being something that everyone kind of looks at. I won't get completely into the psychology of things, but consistent and clean is a really big one, right? So if you think about, things that if you're looking at a piece of paper and it makes your head hurt, are you going to want to keep reading it? Probably not. But if it's something that's consistent, something that I like to do personally, and again, probably pretty subjective, is I want my resume, when it's sitting on top of my cover letter, for the headers to match up like exactly. I don't know why. It's like one of those oddly satisfying things. Oh, yes, Emil.
So sorry, I just wanted to make a couple of comments about the whole resume thing. You talk about how it's subjective, and I totally agree. The people have very strong opinions about resumes, and those people think that it's objective. Like they think that there's a wrong way to do it and a right way to do it. And so you kind of have to be careful about that. It would be nice if you knew like what the hiring unit's preference is. But because of that, it's almost like you're never going to make anyone happy. And I like your approach here, though, because there are certain things you want to avoid just because you don't want to look unprofessional. Like when I see a resume and they've shrunk the font down or they've expanded the margins just so they can fit it all in. Those are like telltale signs. I would never say like that's just a hard pass automatically, but they are sort of indications of somebody who doesn't really appreciate the person who is reviewing the material. So yeah, it's such a tricky deal because there are people who will think that when they look at the resume that you did it wrong, but it's just their opinion. So it's an unfortunate situation, but that is just the way it is.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me pipe in.
And
there.
that's, appreciate that. Cause that's, the box up there that says editing, right? Opinions are not fact. It's important to know what those things are that are really just opinions of people. There might be something that you look for, like me, like if that's lined up, I'm definitely going to read that one, but that's not, going to be everybody's take on it. The main things is you want to be consistent in, what font you're using, colors, if you're using any sort of colors, that thing, use the same formatting that you use on your resumes as you use on your cover letter. Just those kind of things really go, like I said, it's like a deeply rooted psychological thing where people might not realize that they're recognizing that, but they are internally. And just, don't avoid any sort of generic information. If it's something that they can find out about you, like from your LinkedIn profile, then it seems a little bit redundant. Same kind of thing. You don't want to duplicate information. Your resume and your cover letter are complementary documents. Your cover letter shouldn't just be a regurgitation of what your resume is. And then just review it for accuracy, right? If that's going to be, anybody, if something pops out at them as they're not even referencing the job that they are applying for, that's a big one. So we had a question in the Q&A, and I will also, feel free to jump in after I do my little part on it, Emil. So the question was, do you have advice for talking to supervisors if we're looking for a job? I think my supervisor could give me a good recommendation, but I feel uncomfortable telling him that I'm looking. Yeah. So it's a hard one, right? Relationships in the workplace are different than relationships that you have anywhere else, right? And so I think that the way that I would approach it, right, is if I had a supervisor who I hadn't really talked about this kind of thing with before, is to just have more of a conversational talk about it. Like, where do you see yourself in like 20 years, 10 years, something like that, something broad, kind of out in the distance, and saying like, this is really kind of the thing that I want to do long term. And then that might just start the snowball of them saying like, oh, we have this project come up. It was something that you said you were interested in. Do you want to take this on? You can gain experience that way. And not really just going straight to, I've never talked to you about my life goals or professional development before, but can you give me a job recommendation? I would hesitate to do that. Emil, you have more to add there?
I think that's great advice, and it is tricky there. I will say that a critical role for all supervisors is developing their direct reports, right? Like that's something that should be part of their role. Unfortunately, that is not always the case. But if you feel like your supervisor is well-intentioned and he or she really is interested in, either your development or what's best for you, then yeah, have that conversation. And it should come as no surprise to a supervisor that you may not be interested in spending your entire career in that position. And I think that's, as Gordon said, sort of prefacing and saying, here's what I'm thinking about my career, so that it's not as if you have a job in hand and are asking for a recommendation. But if that does come up, that also shouldn't be, hurt feelings by the supervisor that you're asking for a recommendation. Having said that, there are certain situations where you just are not going to ask your supervisor for a recommendation because of a toxic relationship or whatever it might be. And, you can only control what you can control there. But thanks for letting me chirp in there.
Yeah.
And there's
So
another
the
really
advice
good.
there is if you feel comfortable doing it, then do it. If you don't, then don't. It's not a requirement that they, even have to know that you're looking for another job. Obviously, it helps if there's someone that can help you in getting the experience you need to go for that role. And another question that just came in from Mindy, she says, can you speak to the strong recommendations to keep resumes to 1 page? After a decade of professional experience, I can make my resume 2 pages and well formatted, spaced out versus a cluttered 1 page. What is your advice? To me, the page thing is very subjective. If you don't want to overdo it, right? Like you don't want to have like a 6-page resume or something. But if you can't get across, even as concise as you can make it, everything that you need to say about yourself in 1 page, then do 2 pages. I will say that kind of one of those deeply underlying like psychological things is you don't want to do like 1 page and then just like a little bit of a second page. The white resume is kind of can be seen as a little bit and negative. So I would say if you have 2 full pages, do 2 full pages. If you have 1 3/4 pages, that's fine. I would say if you have 1.5, maybe see if you can make it one or the other. Is there something that you can add to make it closer to 2 pages, or is there some stuff that you can be a little bit more concise on, work with some formatting? You also don't want to.
That we actually, Gordon and I talked about this prior to this session as well. It is something you hear a lot of, and if you have been a hiring department, you'll see that it happens a lot. And for the jobs that I've been on a panel for, it doesn't even faze me when the resume is several pages. In fact, for some positions, if it had been 1 page, it would be very odd, because like very high level positions, to have it as a 1-page resume, it would just be something's wrong there. I think the thing to keep in mind is to be concise. You don't want to, have them having to sift through tons of information that will, and you're going to get into this, that is going to come through it in a letter of interest or an interview. And, so the 1-page thing, yes, there are going to be hiring departments or companies who are just absolutely offended that your resume is 1 page. And then you sort of have to ask yourself, do I really want to work for a company where that's the deciding factor? But you'll get into that.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to make a comment as it relates to cover letters. Most of the jobs I've applied to have been within higher ed, and I know those cover letters are often filtered by somebody in HR who may be unfamiliar with the job for which I'm applying. And so what I have found helpful in at least getting to a phone interview is an attachment that addresses each of the required and preferred qualifications bulleted in the same order that they're being included in the advertisement. I'm just trying to make it as easy as I can for the administrative staff that are filtering through my letter to determine whether or not I'll make it to the next step. And that has seemed to work well for me.
So thank you for that transition, Daniel. Like I said earlier, your resume and your cover letter are complementary things, right? One should make you want to look at the other one, right? So it shouldn't be just a repetition of the same information. In the handout, there's a lot more examples on this, kind of those differences that you might want to think about when you're creating the resume and the cover letter. So like we were saying before, specific, concise, relevant information, all of that. Then your cover letter is where you elaborate, right? You connect the related skills and experiences to the job functions, but then you expand on that in your cover letter. Give a short story, some way that you have worked through that, or some accomplishments that you've had. So this is another raised hand thing. So Priscilla, I hope you're ready to talk about this. But so what are some of the things that, if you've ever been part of a hiring team, what are the things that you look for? It's kind of similar to that first one, but this is more about if you are the person that's making or helping make the hiring decision, what are the things that you look for?
Some of the things that we look for is, their passion, excitement for the position, knowledge beforehand. Excuse me. For instance, have they done some research? Like, do they know what they're applying for? Because that kind of helps engaging the, question and answers for the team, and if they're a good fit.
I agree. Thanks, Priscilla.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else have anything they'd like to add about being on a hiring committee? Something that you might look for? Okay, Casey says if this is going to be a good fit next step in their career. Jennifer, go ahead.
I normally, whenever we were hiring, would look at what do they do for the community as well. That was one of my favorite questions, was what do you do for the community, or what are you planning to do for the community?
Great, thanks, Jennifer. And I love what Rainbow said, is she looks for lifelong learners, because it's important to have people who can continue to learn and adapt to changing circumstances, because things always change. As we all know, this has been 2020 was a year of extreme change for a lot of us, in how we do our work and how we can make ourselves productive. So Amanda, okay, this is a great segue here, and I would like to get Emil to speak on it a little bit too. So Amanda says, job hopping, 1 to 2 years on each job turns me off. So I kind of want to dig into why that might make you not look at an applicant. Because to me, the length of time doesn't say as much as what they did. Was the new position that they went to, was it a promotion where they're taking on more experiences? Because to me, then, increasing your career every 1 to 2 years, I think it's impressive. Emil?
I agree. I do understand where Jennifer's coming from, though. I think that if you see a consistently, somebody who's doing that regularly over a long period of time, you see a pattern of it, that it might be an indication. But also you need to look at where they are in their career too, right? So if this person is really very young, or coming back into the workforce and they've, hopped 1 or 2 years, then it would make sense, because this person is developing, they're learning new skills, and they're trying to sort of find their career. But definitely the reality is that you want to, have somebody who is there for a longer period of time to make a bigger impact. But you can see that in, what they've actually accomplished in those roles. But I understand where Jennifer's coming from, though.
Yeah, well, Amanda says that about to interview someone who has consistently changed jobs every 2 years for the same title. Yes, I would say that that's kind of a red flag. But I say it's worth digging into, and there may be, good aspects of that job hopping, or it may be negative. It might be that they don't have great teamwork mentality. It could be, production issues. It could be all sorts of things.
Adriana has a really good point too in the comments, because of the pandemic. I mean, the job market is just bonkers right now. So people are just trying to get their footing and get a purchase on a job. So they're going to be hopping just by the nature of this crazy world we're in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then Catherine says, typos, grammatical errors. That's kind of what I was talking to in the previous slide about accuracy, dates, reviewing, editing, making sure that, there's not, spelling your own name wrong or something like that. Jessica Crawford, did you have something to add?
Yes. So the question was about the job hopping and why that would be a red flag. From an HR person's standpoint, and financial person standpoint, the training process alone, it costs a lot of money to hire and train and then fire, not necessarily fire, but when somebody leaves, and the cost in general for that is just something that I think about. And it's not only money, but time that comes into play when hiring someone. So if they're moving from job to job for whatever circumstances, that's something that I definitely consider. But I also agree with, if they're making vertical moves rather than lateral moves, that is yay for them. But again, I don't want to necessarily have to train or retrain and hire and all of that, a new person every couple of years. So that is something to consider, and something that I look for when hiring people.
So that's, an understandable hesitation. In just that kind of hiring things, and in the HR world, we hear a lot of people talk about, retention rates. When I get my retention rates down, a certain level of retention is healthy for an organization. And so if it is one that doesn't take a whole lot of, getting folks up to speed, if you can utilize resources you have to make transitions easier and doesn't take as much time to do that, those are things that organizations can do to kind of cut down on all of that extra work of having to transition people in. By just documenting the things I do every day, the different processes and workflows, the person who replaces me should be able to fly on the first day. So also just something to think about, not really related to this, but me personally. And then Daniel, did you have something else on this? Or is that still from earlier?
I don't
There,
think.
there we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm still learning technology. I guess I've been in higher ed now for to about 15 years, and I came from a very federal system, so I'm used to, institutional loyalty and all the things that go along with that. I do find it interesting that, within higher ed, we do value longevity. I mean, our pension systems are designed to reward people for longevity, but I think that we overvalue having people in place for long periods of time. In general, if you stay in the same type of position, you're limited to a cost of living allowance raise. So we just don't really show good, in my mind, there's not really good salary increases to reward that longevity. And so the best opportunity for someone to make more money or gain more responsibility is by changing jobs. And that's when you can negotiate that salary. And if you look at the statistics on that, if you're willing to move every 3 to 5 years, on average, you'll make 10 to 15% more than the person that stayed in place. So we ought to be looking for that sweet spot, I think, on allowing people that mobility for more responsibility and the associated salary increases, and or we need to change some of the way we do our compensation so that there is so that people can be rewarded for that longevity. So
Yes.
Totally agree.
Completely agree.
Totally.
Daniel, I feel like you just take the presentation from here on out.
Great.
But yeah, so that's one of the things that I love about UT, just as an aside, is that I completely changed careers and I moved 300 yards. So, there's some sort of loyalty there in that, so working for the university, but it was also a way for me to grow and get into the field that I wanted to do. So very important thing. So we're gonna hit through this fairly quick. This one's also pretty light, but in the handout, there's a lot more, kind of digs in, gives you some examples of these types of things. So you did your resume, your cover letter. It was awesome.
Sorry to interrupt, Gordon. I mistakenly typed answered question for a question that came in, and we need to answer it live.
Okay, what was the question?
How might you approach sending an application to an institution or business, in my case, a university, where you want to work, but you don't have any contacts there? And I'll say, you can obviously say something too here, but try and make a contact, try and find somebody who you can have a virtual coffee with. I literally had somebody do this to me today. And generally people will be more than happy to, meet with you for a few minutes and just, get to know each other and maybe suggest who else you might contact. And that's a nice, thing to do anyways. You don't have to have any sort of personal motives to do that. And that's the way I would, if you are looking for, a way to make contacts. But again, Leslie will be talking more about this in a couple of weeks. But I
was going to say, come back.
Yeah.
talk more about the networking piece for sure.
Yeah.
So hit the interview. We got about 10 more minutes left. So you got your resume and your cover letter in. They were awesome. No typos. Your formatting was great. Now you have an interview. Now is when you need to do the specific work, right? You need to look into the organization that you're applying for. What are their values? What are things that are important to them? What all different kind of things that they do, just for your own, to make sure that it's going to be a good fit for you, as well as giving you, things to talk about in your interview. You want to practice with some general questions that, I feel like everybody asks, like, tell me a little bit about yourself. We all know what those are. I personally keep a list of, questions that I might get periodically, just to kind of think about how you might answer those questions, maybe have some examples ready of a specific time for that question. Like, tell me about the time you had a conflict with a coworker. How did you handle it? How do you wish you would have done something different? A lot of people ask those kind of questions. Have something kind of ready, right? And then prepare. The asterisk means don't over prepare. I think this is important because of, an interview isn't a presentation typically, right? You're not saying like, here are the 5 points of me, and you're reciting things verbatim. You want to have examples ready. You don't want to have a whole lot of, awkward pauses, but you also want to be, personable and approachable, have things ready. But don't say like, if they ask me this question, I'm going to say these exact words, because then you're going to miss one word and they're not going to notice it, but you are, and it's going to throw you off. So I would just recommend against doing that. As you can probably tell, I take the same approach in trainings, because I want to have that back and forth with y'all. I don't want to be, having memorized presentation all the way through. So that's just before, during, very, very important things. There's also a lot of subjectivity in interviews, which people think is objective and is not really. I want to remind you to breathe. Pauses are okay. They oftentimes feel a lot longer to you than they actually are. So if you need to come back to a question or, pause for a minute, do that. Nobody in that interview is going to say like, oh, like this person didn't have something ready for this question typically, right? It should feel organic. It should be a conversation. Obviously, use those pauses to think about kind of how you're going to answer the question, and not just like try to say like, oh, I got to answer this question really fast, and then just say something that's off topic or whatever, right? Make sure that you're actually answering the question that they asked, because that will throw them off. They ask you a question about, I don't know, A, and you're describing Z, right? They're like, what is this person talking about, right? And then, read the room. Like I said, it's organic. It should be more of a conversation. You kind of want to a certain extent, you want to match the energy that's in the room, the body language when people are actually doing interviews in person again. And then also, for COVID times in the interview, just general things to think about, your audio quality, your lighting, just kind of things like that. Make sure there's not crazy stuff going on in the background. I like to use the virtual backgrounds, as you can see, because my bed is right behind me and I don't make my bed. So that's why we got that. And then after the interview, sometimes you're going to put in all of that work, probably more often than not nowadays, and you're not going to get the job. Don't just say like, oh, well, those people didn't recognize like how great I am. I would have been a great fit. Obviously, if you put that much work into something and you're really invested in it, It's not going to feel good. Let yourself feel that. Set a timer on it, right? Say like, I'm going to take today, I'm not going to reflect about any of this other stuff. I'm just going to be kind of down that I didn't get this job that I really wanted. Then reflect, right? So don't overanalyze every certain little thing, but think about the topics that they came up with. What are some of the questions that you didn't feel like you were exactly ready for? Add them to your list. Maybe say like, oh, I would have mentioned this experience when they asked that question. Kind of just things like that. If you get back any sort of feedback from them, take it all obviously with a grain of salt, but look at what that underlying thing was and see how you can continue to develop that and grow that in the future. And then follow up, also pretty subjective thing. There's some people that say like, oh, you need to send a handwritten thank you note, whatever. It's, a lot of times it's pretty subjective. I would, if somebody just sent me an email, that'd be fine. I'm a pretty sustainably minded person. You send me something in the mail, I kind of be like, oh, you wasted a piece of paper and an envelope and postage on this when you could have just sent me an email. Just kind of different things. And then great one there that also relates to this question that Amanda asks is, what are your thoughts on asking for feedback when you aren't chosen for a position? I say always do it. What's gonna hurt? Like if you already didn't get the job, what's it gonna do? They're gonna say no, right? So I would encourage you to do it. Obviously do it professionally. Maybe just say like, hey, I'd like to set up a quick call with you just to kind of see, what y'all's thoughts were, what are things you think I can improve on, and just really frame it as a learning experience for you. And then think about every single interview that you do as a learning experience, right? The more you do it, the better you are going to get at it. Hopefully you don't have to do it a whole bunch, but you should feel more comfortable and be able to get more organic, which is why I recommend just doing some practices with a friend who can be like, oh yeah, I don't know if I would say that. So yeah, I would say, Amanda, you said a few times got really generic canned responses was disappointing. That's why I say go for the phone call if you can, even for that initial thing. So when you get that response back that says, you haven't been chosen for this position, and typically those kind of emails are going to come from the HR person, not necessarily the hiring manager. So I would reach out just by phone or direct email to that hiring manager. Some people don't want to do it. That's fine.
You kind of touched on this, but I would just reemphasize the question isn't like, why didn't you like me? It's
right.
it's what can I do to improve so down the road I can make sure that I have that strength or I don't make that same mistake. So it's a matter of framing is very important, and also be sympathetic to hiring units. They're very busy. They might have 100 or hundreds of people who they had to respond to. They're not going to have the time to give you personalized feedback. And
most people, I don't think, just from my experience, most people aren't going to ask for that follow-up if they don't get the job. And so doing so might make you stand out. And they're like, oh, this person really wanted to grow from that interview. I'm going to remember that person next time I have a job that they might be well fit for. So that's that kind of thing. And then, so this is the same poll as from before. Have I changed your mind about anything? So we're posted again. I want y'all to fill that out again and see what is the thing that you think can overcome any of the other aspects. So we got the majority of people in there. So now that it's switched, it's over 40% to the interview. So I feel like I did something at least.
Your work is done.
My work is done. But yeah, thank y'all for coming today. Here's my contact info. If you have any other follow-up questions, like I mentioned a few times, we're going to send out that handout It's got some really great links on it. And then kind of all of the bullets, just helpful reminders for you when you're working through these kind of documents and getting ready for an interview. But feel free to reach out to me with any other questions that you might have. And then the one last question that I want to do here that
while you're doing that, let me just say that the results last time, it's who you know is at 45%, and interview was at 29%, and the after your presentation, interview was up to 45%, and who you know was down to 16%. So hearts and minds. Good job.
Right. And then there was one last question that I will hand it on. I know we're right at time. But Casey says, thoughts about sending a resume and cover letter when there's no job posting. I personally think that, the resume, maybe you might do if it's kind of a group that you want to start working with, but a cover letter should be different for every single position. And I think in the bullets is something that I forgot to mention, but it's in the bullets in the handout, is that don't do generic cover letters, right? This is your chance it's basically a phone interview on a page. All right, this is for a specific job. Your cover letter needs to show your passion, needs to show your personality, and it needs to relate directly to the job that you are applying for. Great. All right.
Thank you so much, everybody, and thank you so much, Gordon. This was I loved all the participation, all the engagement, great questions. We're going to continue this discussion next week, same time, same place. Again, please encourage other people to join this session. Gordon is a great resource for if you have other questions about resumes, cover letters, your career, reach out to him. Again, thanks everybody for your engagement. I really appreciate it.
I'm excited for the rest of the sessions because now that mine's done, I can just sit back, enjoy the rest of them. So, no, Leslie's still on here, so I'll be there. Leslie, I'll be there listening.
Good. And Melissa is next week, so we'll see you then too. Okay, thanks everybody. Bye-bye.